Funny enough, one of GameSir's most loved product, and probably one of those that put them the most on the map, is one I've never reviewed, and we're about to change this today. Hi, I'm Clef, and you're watching Game Tech Talk. So in my hands is the GameSir G7 SE, but it's part of an extremely popular line from GameSir, the G7, which also have the SE model, which that is one of them right there. And by the way, these two controllers, they're up for giveaways, so stay tuned on how to participate by the end of the video. Of course, these products were sent for review. It has no impact on my opinion, and GameSir gets to see the video at the same time as everybody else. While these two model, now this, the Eneba Special Edition, is a G7 SE, whereas this black one that I have here is a G7 HE. And we'll look at the differences. They're subtle, but there are a few things that differentiate each model from one another, and we'll make sure to cover that in the video. Now, of course, here is the Special Edition Iron Man model. In the box itself, we have this red cable, again red and gold, very much to the colors of Iron Man. USB-C to USB-A, and it is branded with GameSir. Here we have the controller itself and a manual. For anyone that wants to grab this, maybe let people know in the comments if you have. I'm not sure exactly how much time it gives you, but that would be 1 free month maybe, or 14 days. That looks absolutely phenomenal. Glossy finish on the shell, and it feels very much glossy. It looks the part, definitely does. Looks like the paint of a car. A little shine on the buttons as well. Seems to be a very similar feel, so I think they're really going for the same kind of finish. However, the D-pad and function buttons have kind of more of a brushed metal finish. Same goes for the shoulders and triggers. And then the back paddles are red, and then you also have this little muted microphone button at the bottom. They use gold also on the connectors. Overall, amazing look, amazing aesthetic with this controller. So let's go over the buttons. I'm gonna focus on the G7 HE, but I will have a dedicated portion during the video where we'll talk about differences, which we'll look into a little later. Face buttons are mechanical, very nice feeling, have a little bit of a bounce to them. I don't know if it's the same approach that they have with the Khaled for Xbox that I also reviewed, that they were saying had a cushion style tactile button, but they feel so much like micro switches, feels pretty much the same. So if you've laid in on the Khaled for Xbox with not the Flux model, because that one has membrane, but the other one, the one that I reviewed on this channel, it feels exactly the same. A really nice feeling. When it comes to the D-pad, that's definitely tactile. A little stiff maybe. Yeah, if you like a stiff tactile style D-pad, it doesn't have a center pivot. Shoulder buttons are also tactile, very little travel distance, much like the D-pad. Triggers, analog, that's all good. Now, in terms of sticks, we have Hall effect. And then in the back, you have the L4 and R4 buttons. And at the bottom, you can have a 3.5mm jack as well as your microphone mute button. But you also have shortcuts here. When you hold M, you can lower and increase the volume. And you can also change between, when you have a headset, you can change between your game sound or your social party sound as well. So you can do that all with shortcuts. Now, these are officially licensed by Microsoft, so they're going to work just fine on Series S and Series X, but they also work for Windows. We talked about the triggers real quick. They're also Hall effect as far as the responsiveness and the reliability, much like the sticks. I mean, I haven't really heard of triggers drifting, but beyond just the fact that Hall effect doesn't really drift, they have extremely good precision, and especially when dealing only in one axis, one plane, which in the case of triggers is the verticality. So Hall effect triggers, they feel awesome. They're extremely well responsive. And you also have a software based hair trigger. So, if you want something that is pretty much immediately actuated the moment you push it, you have this here, and we'll get into software as well during this video. Just in case this does not support Switch, this is really an Xbox license. So fully licensed by Microsoft, so you don't have Switch support here, you don't have gyro, anything like that. But much like the official Microsoft controllers, you do have rumble in the handle and the grips, as well as the triggers. And then last but not least, in terms of other features, really it all comes down to the shortcut. And I don't know if I mentioned it, but the 3.5mm jack It goes without saying, but just to be clear, it does support a full headset, which means stereo as well as a microphone. So your 3-pin connector is fully supported on this controller. Now, this does not work wirelessly. This is a fully wired operated controller. And you also have, in terms of feature, a variable pulling rate, which we'll also talk about. If you held an Xbox Series X and you held one of those, you know that they feel pretty much for the most part identical. Especially, I mean, this one being black, you could be fooled just at a quick glance into thinking that this is a first-party controller. It feels just as good. In fact, I would argue that it feels a little bit better for my personal taste, just because of the rubber they use in the back grip. And you do have it as well in the Iron Man edition, but you do not have it on the Eneba edition. So if you want something that is more plasticky, the SE, at least in this case, does have the plastic feel instead of the rubber. Personally, I think the rubber feels great. I like it better. I would say, just in terms of what I would expect if I want something in terms of the sensory aspect that is exactly like the series controller, this one would feel maybe a little bit more, but in terms of ergonomics, they all feel exactly the same. And looking at how successful these controllers have sold on Amazon, I think most people agree. It's absolutely bonkers how many of those controllers that GameSir sells. And we only see like ones here on Amazon has sold like 8,000 in the last month. I think there's a reason why Microsoft keeps licensing controllers with them. They're selling a truckload of these, and really they're that good, so I'm not surprised. And then you have all those convenient features as well as having Hall effect sticks. Let's go into the software portion where we will see in terms of what you can expect with these controllers.
When talking about the software, it is available for both Windows and Xbox. You have different profiles that you can choose from, and you'll notice at the bottom you also have the report rate, which you can change from 250, 500, and 1000 Hertz. And also, as is highlighted by the message, headphones won't work when on the 1000 Hertz polling rate. So when clicking on one of the profiles, the first menu you have is mapping, where you can change pretty much any button to something different. Then you have your sticks, where you can address the curves. If you prefer to have a circle reading, you can just leave it as is, but if you prefer a square, you can hit raw. It's not quite a square, it's more like with slightly curved corners. You can also swap your left stick and D-pad if you want, and you can also lock your diagonals. Then you have your triggers, where just as much you can address your dead zones, but you can also have the hair trigger checked on, which will turn your trigger into software corrected hair trigger. So the moment you touch them, it will automatically give you full value. And then you can also address your vibration. Vibration are in the grips, but also in the triggers. Force left trigger vibration, what it'll do, similar to some games on the DualSense by Sony, whenever you push the trigger, it will vibrate, and the deeper you push it, the more it will vibrate. Sync left trigger vibration will make it so that whenever your left grip vibrates, so will the trigger, because very few games actually use that feature. So this way you're pretty much guaranteeing that you will have your triggers rumble regardless of what game you play, because the moment your regular grip rumbles do, so will your triggers if you activate the sync feature. And then of course what you see at the bottom middle is if you want to try the vibration, you just check whichever you want to try and you push LT or RT and it's going to vibrate, so you can check your intensities. Now it's also cool that you can fully customize your triggers and your grips, so you really make it the way that you want it to be. Then last but not least, that'll show you how to calibrate your sticks. You can also decide if you want to use the back paddles or not, and of course allow for your shortcuts with the M button. And regardless of if you go with the HE or SE model, the only thing that's going to change is at the top. Everything else will stay exactly the same. And that's it. The software is basically the same for Xbox and PC. The one difference on Xbox is that pulling rate. It will not let you change to 500 and 1000 Hertz. But people are saying that even if you change it on PC and then you go on Xbox, apparently it works. GameSir on their Discord said different, but there are some pretty convincing tests on YouTube that I've seen, so it seems like it works. All right, let's get back to testing the controller.
Okay, so while this is loading, let's talk a little bit about the differences. Even when looking at the G7 HE and the G7 SE, the shell does not feel quite the same. That one is slightly softer. That one feels a little more like Series X one, with just a little bit of a greeny texture to it. The sticks feel just about the same. Same goes for the triggers. I mean, everything else besides the rubber. But one thing I want to bring to your attention is that the SE models do have these little switches, and what they do is they lock in your bag paddles. I find it's an interesting feature to have. For the most part, you could just have a profile where there's no value to these, so if you end up clicking them, it doesn't matter. But if you wanted to log them all together, which would prevent you from even clicking them, the SE model does have that feature. The HE does not. And you'll notice that the back paddles are also slightly different. They don't have the exact same shape. I don't know if it's going to come across well on the camera, but they're just slightly wider on the SE model. Now, another difference is, of course, the buttons, and this is something you probably want to look for. Doesn't matter which one you buy, but the SE model, for the most part, as far as I know, should all have membrane face buttons and membrane D-pad, whereas the HE has tactile D-pad with mechanical face buttons. As far as the shortcuts, the headphones, all that is all the same. Now, another difference that is going to be impossible for me to illustrate is the rumble. I do find that the rumble is better on the HE model. It's not that it's bad on the SE model. It's actually very similar to the Series X, but it's noisier. Whereas I find on the HE model, whatever difference they made in terms of the rumble, it's just a little more faint in terms of the sound, and you're not losing any punch. So this is another aspect, in my opinion, that they have improved in the HE model. So for the most part, it's kind of a re-release with little tweaks. That's really what I count that the HE to versus the SE. It's difficult to recommend one over the other. It pretty much just falls down to what you prefer. So if you're membrane, just go for this one. If you're tactile mechanical, go for the HE. With that said, even the rumble, while there is a difference, I don't think it's noticeable to the point that you should go one or the other. The other thing to keep in mind, the G7 SE also has a lot more color options available. If you go for the Aniba model, you have a $5 gift card towards a game of your choice on the Aniba website, whereas the HE and SE model that are not Aniba does not have that. And you also retain the Xbox Live, Xbox Ultimate Game Pass free period on the Aniba model, just as you do with the other ones. So let's go test this controller and see what it is all about. Okay, so that's 20,000 on my first attempt. I'm gonna do 2 more, so 3 on each controller to see how that looks like. It's off to a good start. I feel like I've had superior, but keep in mind that this is a budget wired controller for Xbox, and with that in mind, this is extremely good overall. I actually did worse on this one. That doesn't usually happen. Okay, so back to 20,000, but my first core still was my first. One thing that I kept messing up was my accuracy. It wasn't all that great overall. I didn't change my triggers to be actuated like software corrected hair triggers. Maybe that would have changed a thing, because I feel like I kind of kept traveling every now and then as I was pushing down my buttons. Overall, I'm gonna be honest, I'm a little surprised, because just while testing the sticks, I felt like I was gonna do a little bit better. So maybe I'm dealing with a certain acceleration that the game itself has. But to be fair, I am keeping my testing consistent throughout every controller that I test. So I don't usually test with any hair trigger. I don't usually test with addressing anything that is acceleration in the game, if there is any. I haven't even looked. So everything is default, as is always the case. I'd say compared, for example, to the Rainbow 2 Pro that I tested recently, I did better with that one. But with that said, it's still a very good controller overall in terms of my personal testings. I'm getting the impression, and maybe I'm crazy here, but I'm getting the impression that it's not so much that the sticks feels better to me, but they do feel, maybe they don't have the same resistance. We're actually gonna test that in a second. The stick starts moving around 55-ish. That's 0.55 Newton. Whereas on this one, the sticks starts moving at approximately 70. So it's a slightly stiffer stick, and I guess that was having a slight impact on my performance. From what I've seen, for me personally, the SE seems to feel a little bit better. And when it comes to the G7 SE and G7 HE, I have both seen them at $49.99, although you will see a $5 off from time to time. When it comes to the special Iron Man edition, it is $59.99. I can definitely understand why people would go with these controllers over the official ones. They have extra features, they have Hall effects, so you have no risks of drift. If you are going for aesthetic, I think the Iron Man edition looks stunning. However, quite frankly, I will not be using it to game, if I'm being honest. Because the one worry that I have is that the shell would get scratched over time, because it's really glossy. And it's the kind of glossy that I feel would have those little lines of, you know, like even skin just roughing it up over time. So I think this is going to be something I'm going to put on a stand and not touch, because I love the way it looks. And it's definitely one of those products that it looks a lot better in person than it does in the promotional material, if being honest. But yeah, I don't know that I'm going to game with it just because of how good it looks, as weird as that may sound. So if this is important for you, or you don't care but you love the look, then sure, go for it. But if you would want for it to stay as pretty as it is out of the box, I don't know that I would want to game with it. And just for the record, that is me not knowing how it would age, but I'm not going to take any chances, because again, it's really glossy. And I had the Khaled, which also has a part of it that is glossy, and it is already starting to scratch over time. And you know, it is a clear plastic tend to scratch a little easier. However, I'm still not going to risk it, you know what I mean? Overall, in terms of gaming with it, I think I would default more to the SE versus the HE, but I don't feel like the difference is substantial enough. The G7 SE somehow felt a little bit better for me. I do think they're great purchases. I think the price is absolutely knocking it out of the park for the quality that you get. As long as you don't mind playing wired, you know, if you're going for something, if you were hoping for something wireless, this is not your controllers to go for. But if you're okay with wired and you want top performance, these are not elite, but they're the next best thing. You know, that to me, that's what it is. They're just under what I would consider an elite controller to be, but you are getting pretty much top tier performance, top tier components, and top tier features in the non-elite realm of controllers, and they work fully compatible with Xbox. That is it, guys. Hopefully that was insightful. I'm very happy I got to test these controllers. There were many of you in the comments mentioning them. They sell a truckload on Amazon. Seems like it's a very popular model and make for GameSir, and I understand why. So happy that I got to test them. For the giveaway, very simple. You do have to be living in either Canada or the United States, and all you have to do is comment on this video. By the time I select 2 winners, which should be 2 weeks after this video has aired, I will reach out to you guys on the same comment that you left to let you know of your winnings, after which we will communicate by email. And so there it is, guys. Thank you very much for watching. As always, if you have comments, make sure to drop them in the comment box. Consider hitting the like and consider subscribing. All right, I'll see y'all on the next one. Peace.